When her tower fell, she screamed. What happened next will melt your heart. 3 hours of work, gone in 3 seconds. The little girl's scream pierced through the house like a siren. Her grandfather had never heard that sound come from her before. Pure devastation mixed with rage. But here's the thing that made this moment unforgettable. The destroyer of her masterpiece didn't run, didn't hide. He just sat there in the ruins, calm as death itself, and looked her straight in the eye. This is the story of what happened when a 4-year-old girl's tower came crashing down, and why what happened next would change the way she saw the world forever. But to understand that moment, that breaking point, we need to go back a few hours, back to when everything was still standing, back to when Emma believed nothing could go wrong. October in Vermont. That's where this story unfolds. In a quiet home just outside Burlington, where golden afternoon light streams through windows and autumn leaves perform their final dance outside. Inside, a 4-year-old girl named Emma was on a mission. Curly blonde hair escaping from clips, green coveralls splattered with yesterday's paint, and determination burning in her eyes that would put most adults to shame. Her mother had dropped her off that morning at her grandfather's house, a weekly ritual while she worked her hospital shift. "She's been obsessed with building things lately," she'd warned him. "Just keep an eye on her." But the grandfather didn't need to watch closely. Emma's focus was absolute. For 3 solid hours, she transformed the living room into her kingdom. Wooden blocks in every color spread across the carpet like a treasure chest had exploded. She wasn't playing. She was creating something real in her mind. "Look at this," she called out to her grandfather every few minutes, her voice bright with pride. "This is where the princess lives, and over here, this is the bridge to the Dragon's Mountain." The old man sat in his armchair, newspaper forgotten in his lap, captivated by her imagination. There's something mesmerizing about watching a child build worlds from nothing, completely absorbed in their own vision. The centerpiece, the crown jewel, was a tower that grew impossibly tall. Red blocks forming the foundation, blue pieces creating the middle floors, yellow columns rising higher, and, finally, a green triangular piece balanced at the very top, defying gravity itself. When Emma stepped back to admire her work, her entire face glowed. "It's the tallest tower in the whole kingdom." Her grandfather smiled from his chair. "It's magnificent, sweetheart." But there was someone they'd both forgotten about. Someone who'd been watching from the shadows. Whiskers, a 15-pound gray and white cat with a chipped ear and a reputation. The family had rescued him from a local shelter 3 years earlier. A cat with trust issues and a mysterious past. Time had mellowed him, made him affectionate even. But one thing never changed: his obsession with gravity. If something stood upright, Whiskers considered it his sworn duty to test whether it really needed to be standing at all. He'd been napping upstairs on the windowsill, soaking in that autumn warmth. But something had stirred him awake. A sound, a sense, or perhaps just feline intuition that somewhere in the house, something vertical was begging to be horizontal. The grandfather spotted him first. Whiskers appeared in the doorway like a ghost, moving with silent purpose. his yellow eyes locked onto the tower with laser focus. His tail began to swish once, twice, the unmistakable sign of a predator sizing up prey. The old man's stomach sank. He opened his mouth to warn Emma, but the words caught in his throat. Too late. Whiskers prowled forward, circling the tower like a shark. Emma noticed him, and her smile grew even wider. "Grandpa, Whiskers came to see what we made." Oh, he'd come to see it all right, and do much more than that. The cat moved with calculated precision. He reached out one white paw, slowly, deliberately, testing, and tapped the bottom block. The tower trembled. Emma's breath hitched. Whiskers, with what could only be described as deliberate intention, pushed harder. The crash was apocalyptic. At least in the world of a 4-year-old girl, it was the end of everything. Blocks exploded outward in all directions. The princess's castle shattered. The dragon's bridge collapsed into ruins. 3 hours of meticulous work reduced to scattered chaos in a single moment. And there, sitting calmly in the center of the destruction, like a conquering emperor, was Whiskers, his tail wrapped neatly around his paws, his expression radiating pure satisfaction. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Emma's face went through a transformation. Shock first, her eyes wide, mouth falling open in disbelief. Then understanding crashed over her like a wave. Finally, something primal ignited behind those eyes. Rage. Her small fists clenched tight. Her cheeks flushed crimson. The air around her seemed to crackle with barely contained fury. "Whiskers!" The roar that came from such a tiny body made her grandfather flinch in his chair. She stormed toward the cat, one finger extended like a weapon of accusation. "Bad! You're so bad! Why would you do that?" Here's where something extraordinary happened. Because Whiskers, instead of fleeing like any sensible cat, caught red-pawed, simply stared right back at her and meowed, loud, unapologetic, as if challenging her very premise. "Excuse me? That structure was clearly unstable. I was performing a necessary safety inspection." Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "I worked on that for hours. It was perfect." Tears began forming, threatening to spill over. Her whole body shook, not just with anger, but with the devastation of loss. This wasn't about blocks anymore. This was about pride, effort, creation, and watching something precious be destroyed. Whiskers meowed again, softer now, and tilted his head with apparent innocence. A standoff. A 4-year-old architect versus a feline demolition expert, neither willing to concede an inch. From his armchair, the grandfather knew this was more than just a childish tantrum. This was a fork in the road, a moment that would teach Emma something crucial about life, if handled correctly. He rose from his chair, knees protesting with audible cracks, and lowered himself to the floor between them. "Emma," he said gently, "come sit with me for a moment." She turned to him, chest heaving, tears now streaming freely down her flushed cheeks. "But, Grandpa, he ruined it. He ruined everything I made." "I know, sweetheart. I saw what happened." He opened his arm, and she collapsed against him, small body trembling with sobs. You have every right to be upset. You worked so hard. Why did he do it? Her voice came out as a wounded whisper. Look at him, Emma. Really, look. She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes, and glanced at Whiskers. The cat had stopped his defensive posturing and was now gently rubbing his cheek against one of the fallen blocks, purring audibly. Do you think Whiskers knocked over your tower because he wanted to hurt you? Emma's bottom lip quivered. Yes. What if that's not what happened? The grandfather's voice was soft, patient. What if Whiskers doesn't understand that those blocks meant something special to you? To him, they're just interesting things that move and make sounds. He saw you having fun, and in his cat brain, he thought he was joining the game. But it wasn't a game for him to break. You're absolutely right. And your feelings are valid. They matter. He looked into her tearful eyes. But here's something important. Whiskers didn't mean to hurt you. He doesn't think like we do. He doesn't understand hours of work or plans or towers. He just wanted to play. He wanted to be included. The grandfather watched the gears turning in Emma's young mind. He could see the anger slowly draining away, replaced by something more complex: confusion, consideration, the first stirrings of empathy. He wanted to play with me? I believe so. You looked like you were having the time of your life, and he felt left out. Emma stared down at her finger, the one she'd been pointing in accusation. Slowly, she lowered it. Then she did something that made her grandfather's throat tighten with emotion. I'm sorry I yelled at you, Whiskers. Her voice had transformed, no longer sharp with anger, but soft with understanding. She reached out a tentative hand and touched the top of his head. Whiskers immediately leaned into her palm, his purr rumbling louder. You didn't mean to make me sad, did you? The cat's yellow eyes closed peacefully, and for a long moment they simply existed together in that space. A child learning compassion, a cat receiving forgiveness. Emma picked up a yellow block, turning it over in her small hands thoughtfully. Grandpa? She looked up at him. Can we build it again? A warm smile spread across the old man's face. Absolutely we can. Can Whiskers help this time? I think he'd really like that. What followed was something beautiful to witness. Emma began rebuilding her tower, but this version was different. Lower to the ground, more stable, and most importantly, with spaces deliberately left between blocks where a curious cat could weave through. She'd place a piece, and Whiskers would approach to sniff it approvingly. When he accidentally knocked one over, Emma giggled instead of shouting, Silly Whiskers, that one belongs over here. The grandfather watched from his chair as his granddaughter learned one of life's most important lessons in real time. Patience, adaptation, the understanding that things rarely go as planned and that's okay. That love means making room for others, even when they disrupt your carefully laid plans. And Whiskers purred through all of it, walking between the blocks like the tower had been designed specifically for him. Perhaps in a way it had been. That was 5 years ago. Emma is 9 now, a soccer player, a straight-A student, a girl with a calendar full of playdates and activities. But every single time she visits her grandfather's house, before she even takes off her shoes, she asks the same question. Where's Whiskers? The grandfather keeps a photograph from that day on his desk. Emma, with her finger pointed in accusation, Whiskers sitting calmly in the rubble, both frozen in that moment of conflict that became something more. That photo serves as a reminder of something profound, something easy to forget in the chaos of daily life. Towers fall, plans crumble, things we work hard to build get knocked down, sometimes without warning, sometimes without reason. And when it happens, the instinct is to point fingers, to blame, to let anger consume us. But what Emma learned at 4 years old, what many adults still struggle to understand, is this. Sometimes the force that destroys your plans is also the teacher that shows you how to build something better, something with more grace, more patience, more room for others to be part of your world. Whiskers didn't mean to teach Emma about resilience. He was just being a cat. But in his oblivious destruction, he gave her a gift that would last a lifetime. He taught her that perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. He taught her that anger is natural, but compassion is a choice. He taught her that the best creations are the ones built with space for others, even when they're messy and imperfect. So if your tower just fell down, if your plans just scattered like blocks across the floor, take a breath. Look at what knocked it over. Maybe it wasn't malicious. Maybe it was just life being life, chaos being chaos, or someone who wanted to be part of your story but didn't know the right way to ask. And maybe the next tower you build will be even better because you learn to build it with flexibility, with patience, with room for the unexpected. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to this channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And leave a comment about a time your own tower fell and what you learned when you rebuilt it. Remember, build your towers strong, but build them with spaces in between. Build them with room for others. Build them knowing they might fall, and that's part of the beauty. Take care of each other out there. And tonight, give your pets an extra moment of attention. They're teaching lessons you might not even realize you need to learn.